Good morning and welcome to Rising. Happy Friday. We've got another great show for you today. I am here with Niall Stanage, not usually here on a Friday, but here nonetheless.
I was going to say, you're on a Friday. I got to speak to Amber Duke on a Wednesday. The whole world is shifting on its axis, but
Amber
here we
is
are.
Out there in the field somewhere, missing,
Yes.
but we will hunt her down and have her back for next Friday.
And are you happy to be sitting here working on a Friday morning, Robert? Idling?
I welcome another opportunity to address this great nation and our wonderful viewers.
The issues that face the nation.
Yeah, I am actually pretty excited about the things we're talking about today. It's a number of issues I've mentioned in other contexts on other programs throughout the week, so I am excited for it.
Absolutely. Now, we do have a lot coming up on Rising, including that the Wall Street Journal is reporting that there are preparations being made at the IRS, specifically to make it easier for them to go after left-leaning groups.
Plus, former National Security Advisor John Bolton has been indicted. We'll jump into all those details.
And President Trump has revealed he will be meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Budapest. He's also set to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky later today at the White House. Now, sorry, it is now. I almost crept into your important words of wisdom. We could ventriloquize each other's op-eds. Robby, what is on your radar?
Indeed. Well, the ladies of The View think Republicans, particularly Republican men, are too afraid of them to come on the show. Seriously. Host Joy Behar made that case during a recent episode. Take a look.
I think that we should have more Republicans on the show, but they don't want to come on. They're scared of us. It's like Marjorie Taylor Greene says that she finds the Republican men afraid of powerful women. Well, that may be true of all the political persuasions. But if they would come on this show and they can explain to us what they're trying to do to this country.
Are Republican men afraid of powerful women, afraid to go on The View? I call BS on Joy Behar's claim. No, I do not think Republicans would refuse the opportunity to go on The View. In fact, I suspect that virtually every Republican commentator, pundit, or politician of even basic talent or media savvy would relish the opportunity to mix things up with Joy and Sunny and Whoopi and all the rest. Conservatives love arguing with liberals. Look at how much fun Scott Jennings is having on CNN. Look how much fun I'm having here on Rising. The fun never ends. That's because members of the GOP aren't looking for some safe space where their views are never challenged. Oh no. They aren't afraid of gladiatorial intellectual combat. Now look, I am definitely painting with a broad brush here. I'm sure there are some Republican political activists who wouldn't enjoy the specific format of The View or don't have enough confidence in themselves, but come on, you know I'm right that the vast majority would love a chance to explain their thinking to Joy. Get Ben Shapiro on there. Get Matt Walsh. Get Glenn Beck or Sean Hannity. Heck, get Scott Jennings. He'd be perfect. There are plenty of terrific ladies who would also get the job done as well. Get Rising's Amber Duke. She'd love it. I have her number. Ask if you want it. Now, why am I talking about all this? Well, for one thing, I think it's important to dispel the idea that the two sides of the political spectrum don't enjoy talking to each other. And I get why this notion endures. Americans are sharply divided on politics, and they strongly disagree about which set of ideas, left-wing ideas, right-wing ideas, some mix of the two, would be best for the country. Disagreement can be unpleasant for those who don't engage in it as a job or sport or full-time hobby. Certainly not fun to argue all the time. It's not fun to go through life being constantly challenged. And unfortunately, too much of the media mirrors the sharp partisan split. For a long time, we've had mainstream media and we have conservative media. With conservative media, you get an explicitly right-wing perspective that is usually very favorable to President Donald Trump, maybe with some token liberal perspective thrown in as an occasional foil. With mainstream media, you get faux neutrality that's actually very liberal, particularly on cultural issues where it's downright progressive left, and then some token Republican in name only who is actually a Trump-hating ex-member of the GOP. The View itself mimics this dynamic as the right-leaning member of the panel, Alyssa Farah Griffin, is a former White House staffer who's extremely opposed to Trump, which, by the way, is a perfectly valid opinion, but not one that represents the vast majority of conservatives. Most conservatives love Trump. Now, there are some exceptions, but over the course of my lifetime, it's become increasingly rare to find real debate on cable news. It's more about humoring the perspectives of the hosts and the perspective of the audience. Well, who's learning anything from that? The great thing, in my view, about the rise of new media, social media, YouTube, etc., is that these platforms have brought back real debate. Now you have people arguing about politics at great length on the internet, and these people represent not just some stale two-party duopoly, but a range of ideological perspectives, from socialism to libertarianism to MAGA populism to abundance democracy to everything in between. I'm proud that Rising, this show, which was ahead of the curve when it launched 7 years ago, has played a role in fostering these important debates and continues in that fine tradition today. And if Joy Behar wants to familiarize herself with what happy debate looks like, well, she's welcome to call me up for The View. I don't love New York City, and as I'm reading the polls for the mayoral race, I think I'm about to love it even less. But for you, Joy, I'd be happy to make the trip.
Robby Soave on The View. It's what the public want, what the people want, Robby.
Give the people what they want.
Exactly. So we were kidding because I messed up slightly in the intro and almost started reading that.
Yes.
But in fact, as I was listening to you, I could have read the vast majority of it and agreed with all of it, really, in terms of the need for more rigorous and authentic debate, the way that the room for that seems to have got narrowed on cable news. It does.
So narrow.
It does, very much so. It used to exist more so than it does now, and as you rightly pointed out, a lot of the time on both sides, the dissenting voice can be rather tokenistic or not in fact representative. I mean, you mentioned Alyssa Farah Griffin, but Fox News also has those people who I consider people who play Democrats on Fox News, which isn't real. They're not really indicative of a particular progressive school of thought. There are also issues, I know even some past commentators on this show would have argued that even on networks like MSNBC, what you hear is a kind of democratic leadership voice as opposed to, actual voices from a harder left kind of perspective often. So all of that is true, and I think it's a shame. I do think that we have genuine debates that are civil but emphatic and honest here, and I think that happens elsewhere in the digital space, but much less so on linear television.
Right, and we are free, you and I are freed because we're primarily journalists. I mean, we have ideological point of views. We are freed from just kind of defending what the Republican Party is doing or the Democratic Party is doing. We have no interest in that. The people really have no interest in that. That mode of commentary has gotten very, very stale.
It has.
Maybe that's what was wrong with because I know everybody maligns the kind of crossfire era as being shallow, although in some ways I think it is, again, it's superior to, again, just having a host and just having the same perspective represented.
Well, it is, except the problem that I have with the crossfire model is that it did get very talking points. Like it seemed to me like you just, and I don't mean the show talking points, I mean party talking points, where you actually would just bring people on and have somebody mouth Republican talking points and have someone mouth Democratic talking points. And that's not really a debate, and it's not very interesting for viewers.
And, Tucker Carlson was involved in the end of it, and I think you can see how that format obviously limited his huge potential as someone who can speak at great length in a way that is not just narrowly focused on what's good for the Republican Party. I think his detractors would say, some of his detractors are in the Republican Party. They wish he'd stop calling them out, but it was so limited by the format. And what YouTube and Substack and social media have allowed us to do is have these longer discussions and debates where you must get beyond talking points, because the talking points that you'd have prepared or a partisan operative would have prepared cannot fill the time. We have to go beyond it. I mean, I remember when I started doing Rising at the beginning, transitioning most from doing those kinds of hits on cable news, where like we have to get to at least 8 minutes. In our previous only YouTube format, we absolutely had to get 8 minutes. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I have 8 minutes worth of things to say. And you train to actually say something real, to get beyond just what you'd hear anywhere else. It's great.
And also to actually defend in debate your position rather than simply you shout your part and the other person shouts their part and then you're done.
Right, because you can defend any position for 10 seconds, but if I can't defend it for 8 minutes, maybe it was a weaker position than I thought.
Exactly.
How about that? All right, we had some agreement, but I'm sure we'll get to some non-agreement. Coming up next, federal grand jury has indicted John Bolton. We'll dive into those details. Stay with us. Well, a federal grand jury in Maryland has indicted former National Security Advisor John Bolton on charges of transmitting and retaining national defense information. Bolton is actually in court as we speak.
Prosecutors allege that Bolton, quote, abused his position as National Security Advisor to share information about his day-to-day activities with two people who were related to him and didn't have security clearances. Bolton allegedly shared more than 1,000 pages of such information beginning in April 2018.
The indictment says that some of the information Bolton shared were top secret, classified details relating to national defense. Bolton allegedly shared this info in diary-like entries. The indictment reads in part, quote, at no point did Bolton have authorization to store or transmit the classified information that he sent to individuals 1 and 2 via his personal electronic devices and accounts, nor did at any time individuals 1 and 2 have authorization to know or store the classified information that Bolton gave to them.
The indictment also mentions that in July 2021, a Bolton representative told the FBI that Iran had hacked one of the former National Security Advisor's personal accounts. The hacker then allegedly emailed Bolton and his representative, saying in part, quote, this could be the biggest scandal since Hillary's emails were leaked, but this time on the GOP side. Bolton said in a statement that he was innocent and that he has devoted his life to America's national security and foreign policy. He also said he was President Trump's latest target, saying in part, quote, these charges are not just about his focus on me or my diaries, but his intensive effort to intimidate his opponents, to ensure that he alone determines what is said about his conduct. Dissent and disagreement are foundational to America's constitutional system and vitally important to our freedom. I look forward to the fight to defend my lawful conduct and to expose his abuse of power.
President Trump reacted to the news during a press conference. Let's listen to that.
President John Bolton was just indicted by a grand jury in Maryland. Do you have a reaction to that?
I didn't know that. You tell me for the first time, but I think he's, a bad person. I think he's a bad guy. Yeah, he's a bad guy. It's too bad, but that's the way it goes.
Case against him?
That's the way it goes, right?
Of course, many reactions are pouring in. A senior fellow at the Brookings Institute, Norm Eisen, wrote on Blue Sky, DOJ has lost any presumption of regularity, and after the Comey and James charges, I am very suspicious of the Bolton ones.
Meanwhile, journalist Glenn Greenwald wrote on X, quote, John Bolton spent his whole life demanding life imprisonment and even the death penalty for anyone mishandling and causing the leak of classified information until he was charged with it, at which point he screamed, abuse of power. So, I'm actually interested to hear what you have to say about this, Niall. Not that I'm always interested to hear what you have to say, but it looks to me, and admittedly I haven't gone over every exact detail of the case yet. We still have a lot of information to learn. I know exactly what John Bolton would say about this if this was anyone else caught doing this, that this is a very serious crime. He would overplay how serious it is. That is, he's a kind of national security hawk. Transmitting classified documents to other people, even if it's your family members, is obviously against the law. Now we have to wait to hear his defense of why he did this. Was he aware it was classified? It's hard to imagine him not being aware of that. Now, I can get into my dislike of how the government overclassifies information overall, which is why Biden and Trump, I was more inclined to let off the hook for not being aware that they had classified information to some degree. Although Trump could have given it back, and we would have saved ourselves a lot of grief when he was told it was classified. But this is different than that, and I know everybody's on the Democratic side, or some of them are going to say it's political persecution. It could be political persecution and also completely legally justified and rational.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the difficulties of the moment that we're in is that anything that is in any way related to Trump all gets sort of thrown into the same bag together as if it's all exactly the same thing. It is certainly true that Trump has gone after or instructed people to go after Comey and Tish James and Bolton. That does not mean that the strength of the case against those three people are all the same. I think the one against Comey is extremely thin and hazily defined and not borne out by the facts that we do know. Now, maybe more will come out in court. We'll see that. In Bolton's case, I mean, the indictment just has a lot more flesh on it.
Yes.
It goes into quite a lot more detail about what he is alleged to have done, why what he's alleged to have done would have been illegal, would be illegal, would involve the transmission of classified information in an illegal way. It even includes in some of these emails, like there's one where Bolton to one of these people expresses what sounds like alarm at the idea that the person might have printed out the message, as if he knows that it's classified and therefore it should be kept between these people who are sending it around themselves. I think that the part of this is if the conduct alleged in the indictment is borne out, it just seems honestly as if Bolton was operating out of a kind of sense of entitlement, that he's allowed to do it in a way that he doesn't think that other people should be. I mean, I've mixed feelings about Glenn Greenwald, but what Greenwald said there, I would largely agree with. If this were someone else, Bolton would be up in high dudgeon about it, I suspect.
Yes, a self-importance. He thinks he's Otto von Bismarck. He thinks he is, commanding and controlling all the world's global affairs, that he's the foremost expert on it, and that he should. We and I have talked about this, that, why, although I suppose this is over a time period where he was in the administration, if I'm...
and following
and
that.
following. And then it's like, why do you still have access to classified documents? This just seems to pose a problem in inviting people to enter legal jeopardy. If they're if we overclassify everything and then you have access to classified documents, but you're not in the government, what is the point of that? It seems like you're likely to entrap yourself at some level going there. Now, again, I want to know more about what exactly, to the extent they can even tell us, or they'll say it's classified, we can't tell you. And again, the government overclassifies things. Now, the fact that Iran, however, did hack him and made a threatening kind of, that gets into a serious national security issue. So there's that component of it too, that maybe there was actually a breach, so to speak, not just theoretically you did something wrong, but it had no effect. There actually was an effect.
No, absolutely. And while you can make the argument about overclassification generally, I think across the board, in John Bolton's alleged case, in Trump with the Mar-a-Lago documents, in Hillary Clinton, I have never been one on the left to be like the sarcastic, but her emails. There was a legitimate issue there, which I think should have been investigated. So yeah, I think these things are definitely problematic.
Fascinating. All right.
Up next, President Trump is set to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky today, short distance away at the White House. Don't go anywhere, we'll talk more about it.
Well, hot off the successful first phase of a peace deal in Gaza, President Trump is set to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky today ahead of a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Trump announced that meeting in a Truth Social post yesterday after a phone call with Putin, writing in part, "I have just concluded my telephone conversation with President Vladimir Putin of Russia, and it was a very productive one. I actually believe that the success in the Middle East will help in our negotiation in attaining an end to the war with Russia-Ukraine." Trump continued, "At the conclusion of the call, we agreed that there will be a meeting of our high-level advisors next week. President Putin and I will then meet in an agreed-upon location, Budapest, Hungary, to see if we can bring this inglorious war between Russia and Ukraine to an end." The president did not mention a time and date for that meeting.
This all comes as Trump has seemingly grown more frustrated with Putin for being slow to end the war. Earlier this week, Trump threatened to send Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine if Russia didn't make progress toward peace. And on Tuesday, Trump had this critique for Putin.
Look, I'm very disappointed because Vladimir and I had a very good relationship, probably still do. I don't know why he continues with this war. This war has been so bad for him. He's going into 4 years of a war that he should have won that war in 1 week. He's now going to soon be into his 4th year, but he just doesn't want to end that war. And I think it's making him look very bad. He could end it. He could end it quickly.
Oh, my president, the peace president, trying to rack up those additional Nobel Peace Prizes. I love to see it. I am at my most supportive of Trump as he tries to handle basically these two matters, the Middle East and the Ukraine-Russia situation. I share his frustration with Vladimir Putin, and you and I have sparred on this issue somewhat. You being more, not that I'm unsympathetic to the Ukrainian position, I'm of course sympathetic to them, but what else can be done? I've supported the negotiation, and we needed to explain to Zelensky that the whole defend Ukraine to the last inch of territory Biden philosophy is just not going to be a reality. But Zelensky has accepted that, and they've come along. Russia has not. So I frankly have supported Trump's more aggressive line toward Russia, even saying, well, if they want to fight for the whole thing, then they're going to fight for the whole thing. We're going to fight them back. Yeah. So I'm fine with how he's handled it.
Well, I mean, we were talking, I guess, yesterday about how Trump's volatility can, in some situations, be advantageous. And he certainly did in the final stages of the lead up to the Gaza peace plan or whatever, ceasefire, whatever we want to call it, apply some pressure to Israel, which I thought was a good thing. On Russia and Ukraine, to my mind, he zigzags so much that it's very hard to tell what his actual position is. I took huge exception to the comments he made a few months ago where he was suggesting that Ukraine was somehow to blame for its own, for it being invaded. Yeah. There's a whole broader issue about NATO encroachment, but that's a different conversation. And so, earlier this week, for example, or several days ago, Trump was talking about sending the Tomahawks. Then he has a call with Putin and he seems all pally with Putin, and they're going to meet in Budapest. We'll see, perhaps our viewers will have seen by the time they're watching this, more of his interactions with Zelensky today, which hasn't happened as we speak. But it's just difficult to trace what his bedrock position is. Where you and I disagree is that I favour stronger American intervention, I think it's fair to say, on Ukraine's behalf. Now, not getting involved in a direct shooting war, but I think the United States should shore up Ukraine's military defences more to put pressure on Russia to make concessions.
Well, if Russia is not playing ball at all, I am also willing to do that. Before, the conflict was at such a place where I thought both sides were being a little unreasonable. The Ukrainian side is not being nearly as unreasonable anymore. Now it is Russia is clearly the unreasonable situation, because we basically said they can keep the territory that they gained. We just need a security guarantee for the rest of Ukraine. We all discussed that, and then the war continues on their end. If they're just going to continue the war on their end, then, and especially now, it's not us sending Ukraine directly, it's them buying weapons from NATO, and NATO is contributing more to the defense of NATO. We all kind of got on the same page, so I have less issue with it now. Russia is more of the outlier in just not wanting to. If they want war on that level and they're that determined to get it, then I don't know why we wouldn't make this more difficult for them to conquer the country.
Right. No, I think that's the bottom line, really, on that.
But we don't want that. We want them to negotiate and bring an end to this horrific conflict. And Trump clearly wants that too. But on some level, ball's in your court now, Russia.
Right. And it depends what the price is as well.
Yeah.
Next on Rising, I'll be talking about the No Kings protests sweeping the nation tomorrow and how preparations are being made at the IRS to go after left-leaning groups more easily. Stick around for that.
All right, Niall, dying to find out what's in your notes today.
I'm glad you asked, Robby, because tomorrow millions of Americans will come together to show their opposition to President Trump, his policies and his power grabs. It's time for another No Kings event. Last time around, in June, an estimated 5 million people came out from big cities to small towns. Tomorrow, the crowds could be even larger. There are more than 2,600 events planned across the country. And that's a reflection of the huge number of people way beyond the Democratic Party base who have real concerns about what the man in the White House is doing. A poll in September from the Pew Research Center found that 2/3 of Americans believed that Trump had already, quote, improperly used his office to punish those who say things he doesn't like. Even among Republican-leaning Americans, more than 4 in 10 agreed with that assessment. So, as tomorrow's massive protest looms, no doubt Trump and his GOP allies are reacting moderately, sensibly, and with due respect for the free speech rights of the dissenters, aren't they?
Saturday, they're going to be parading around the National Mall. They call it the No Kings rally. We call it the Hate America rally, because you'll have all the Marxists collected, all the Antifa people, the BLM remnants. You'll have the pro-Hamas wing of the Democrat Party, and they're going to be out here demonstrating and screaming and wailing.
That was, of course, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson on the pro-Trump Real America's Voice network. It's easy to roll your eyes at that kind of rhetoric, and I certainly did. But we shouldn't take it lightly either, because there's a concerted effort to brand tomorrow's rallies as anti-American, dangerous and potentially violent, even though the organisers have emphasised repeatedly that the protests should be peaceful. Regardless, Texas Governor Greg Abbott is calling out the National Guard in response, saying, quote, "Violence and destruction will never be tolerated in Texas." But will dissent be tolerated in Trump's America, though? That's the real question. It's not hard at all to connect the dots on what the president and his allies are doing. They're pushing an effort on multiple fronts to cast legitimate political opposition as criminal, to portray dissenters as subversives or even domestic terrorists, and thereby to justify the use of repressive power against them. To pretend that that's not happening is to sleepwalk into real danger, losing vital freedoms all along the way. And of course, it's not only about no kings. Here's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent talking on the Charlie Kirk show about using the powers of his massive, sprawling department.
Follow the money. When you see these groups where all the signs match, they have hundreds of the same umbrellas that they're using. After they cause the mayhem, they have the same lasers that they're using to blind our police force. How are they constructed? Because this takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of organization, and we are going to do that. We have started to compile lists, put together networks, and there's a long record here. And we don't know how much of the support's coming in from overseas. We don't know how much being supported by U.S. nonprofits, C3s that give money to C4s. But this is mission critical for us now, just as after 9/11 and Osama bin Laden, the ultimate culprit, was captured. We are operationalizing this here at Treasury.
Nothing says freedom like the Secretary of the Treasury announcing he's compiling lists of people who use similar umbrellas, or comparing critics to Osama bin Laden. These aren't idle threats either. Just a couple of days ago, the Wall Street Journal revealed that preparations were being made at the IRS to, quote, allow the agency to pursue criminal inquiries of left-leaning groups more easily. And Reuters last week noted that White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller is, quote, deeply involved in reviewing government investigations into, quote, what the administration labels domestic terror networks, which include non-profits and even educational institutions. It's worth noting some of the absurd reasoning at work here. The Journal story, for example, noted that Trump's people at the IRS have argued for punishing colleges by stripping their tax-exempt status merely if pro-Palestinian demonstrations take place on their grounds. The purported basis for this would be that, quote, allowing such demonstrations was a form of support for terrorism. That, in turn, is a window onto the bigger picture. Every day, almost every hour now, Trump and his allies are casting their political opponents as criminals or terrorists. In doing so, they are quite deliberately creating a pretext. They're inventing reasons to use the full force of the government to suppress legitimate criticism. And this, remember, is all coming from a president who has in the past tried to overturn an election and right now has put troops on the streets. It's authoritarianism 101, and it's coming direct from the White House. Here's Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt just yesterday on Fox News.
That the Democrat Party's main constituency are made up of Hamas terrorists, illegal aliens, and violent criminals. That is who the Democrat Party is catering to.
This is nonsense, of course, but it's dangerous and sinister nonsense. And if it's not exposed as such, it is absolutely leading to a very dark place. That's just one reason why tomorrow's No Kings protest, an act of mass resistance, is so desperately needed.
Very interesting. I made some notes. I don't, overall disagree with what you're saying. I'm a major supporter of free speech and the First Amendment. I think the administration's domestic agenda with respect to civil liberties and speech is certainly concerning, more than concerning to me. I also don't, when I see the No Kings protests, I don't particularly see organized, violent Antifa-type groups. What I see is a far more sinister threat, in my view,
Really?
which is old boomer liberals who will make it impossible to reform our vast entitlement system because they keep these blood-sucking vampires
wanting social security and Medicare and things like that, Robby.
And just a tremendous social safety net that's bankrupting.
Wanting not to fall into indigence in their old age. How could they?
That's what I want for them. So that's the real threat. I think there's a little bit of naivety, or naivety or maliciousness on the right for thinking how well funded or organized what they call Antifa is. I have been to many protests. I have studied and attended protests on campuses, protests everywhere in streets of DC that have turned violent. There are certainly violent elements, and there are professional protester elements. How organized or well funded they are. Some of the things Scott Bessent is saying there, like they all have the same umbrellas. Like umbrellas don't cost a lot of money. Like these are not their tactics. It's like a little bit like the Joker in the Dark Knight. It's like this is cheap. What I'm doing. This doesn't cost a lot of money. I kind of think of them as like groupies for bands. Like they travel around, they go to protests. They're not living it up in luxury.
Right.
They're people who that's what they like to do is attend protests. And there's violent, and if they're violent, they should be arrested and they should be rounded up. That's fine. But to think that there's some shadowy cabal behind them or that it's a foreign overseas, it's far more likely that if there's overseas involvement in our politics that is bad, that it's happening online, not that it's actually what you see on the streets.
Right, and just briefly, because I know we have to move on in a second, but the shadowy cabal thing I also think is intended to delegitimize the number of people who just disapprove of what Trump is doing. So you say, oh, well, it's all organized, they're all paid protesters. Like, they're not all paid protesters. If there were 5 million people at the last No Kings protest, it wasn't George Soros behind the scenes handing out $20 notes.
Of course, Niall, I remember, it's ironic, it's shoes on the other foot. I remember 2010 going to Tea Party rally after Tea Party rally.
AstroTurf.
And I was told this is all the Kochs are paying them all to be here. This is just all the manipulation. Frankly, some of the associate of the same that it's all the Kochs behind it. This is reminiscent of that to me. I mean, certainly the Kochs were against the Obamacare policies and were spending money against them, but also the thousands of people showing up had genuine opposition to the policies they were seeing. I tend to think that's the case here.
I agree with that.
Next up, the first New York City mayoral debate was held on Thursday. We'll have more on the fiery comments from Zohran Mamdani and Andrew Cuomo. Zohran Mamdani, currently the frontrunner to be New York City's next mayor, is facing heat after comments that he made on the war in Gaza.
In an appearance on Fox News, Mamdani declined to say definitively whether or not Hamas should lay down its arms. Take a look at that.
But you won't say that Hamas should lay down their arms and give up leadership in Gaza.
I don't really have opinions about the future of Hamas and Israel beyond the question of justice and safety and the fact that anything has to abide by international law. And that applies to Hamas, that applies to the Israeli military, applies to anyone you could ask me about.
Those comments came up again Thursday night, mayoral debate between Mamdani, Andrew Cuomo, and Curtis Sliwa. When asked this time, Mamdani said, "Of course I believe that they should lay down their arms." But Cuomo wasn't satisfied with that response, and the former New York governor also brought up Mamdani's association with popular leftist influencer Hasan Piker.
The assemblyman will not denounce Hamas. The assemblyman will not denounce Hasan Piker, who said America deserved 9/11. The assemblyman just said in his response, well, it depends on occupation. That is code, meaning that Israel does not have a right to exist as a Jewish state, which he has never acknowledged.
Mamdani had a response ready, accusing Cuomo of not doing enough to embrace New York City's Muslim community.
It took Andrew Cuomo being beaten by a Muslim candidate in the Democratic primary for him to set foot in a mosque. He had more than 10 years, and he couldn't name a single mosque at the last debate we had that he visited. And what Muslims want in this city is what every community wants and deserves. They want equality, and they want respect. And it took me to get you to even see those Muslims as part of this city. And that, frankly, is something that is shameful and is why so many New Yorkers have lost faith in this politics.
Yeah.
Mamdani has maintained his large lead in the mayoral race since winning the Democratic primary in June. The second and final mayoral debate will be held on October 22nd.
Well, it's interesting that he did come out then and say that he thinks they should be disarmed. I thought the interview he did on Fox was mostly successful, and he did well. That was the one area that created a kind of viral moment where I thought it would have been perfectly easy for him to say that without getting into the weeds of the issue. I don't care that much, honestly, about his opinion when they've tried to go after him for not being sufficiently pro-Israel or whatever. He's mayor of New York City. It doesn't matter to me. It feels like a little bit of a distraction. But this was a rather direct question that he dodged rather directly, that I don't know why you wouldn't just say, well, yeah, they're a terrorist organization. Ideally, they would not possess weapons, especially when I looked back and in 2022, again, he was pretty woke pretty recently, tweeted like, we need to ban or confiscate or whatever it was. We need to ban all guns. Okay, you have no problem saying we need to ban all guns, but we can't ban guns specifically for Hamas. That seems like a flaw in your ideology, but he addressed that, so I'll move on.
So to the point about it's a New York City mayoral race, it shouldn't really matter. I think it does, in fact, matter what view people take of that conflict, because it goes to issues of judgment, and many people, including me, think issues of sort of basic morality about the world. So in Mamdani's case, you have someone who has been very critical of Israel's conduct in various ways. And in Andrew Cuomo's case, you have someone who volunteered to join Benjamin Netanyahu's defense team. That, to me, I think there are a lot of New Yorkers for which that divide is simply the divisive issue. Many, if I was casting a ballot, I would obviously be on Mamdani's side of that question. I accept that people are on Cuomo's side of it as well. In relation to the Hamas arms question, what he said in the debate last night was that both sides should put down their arms and that a ceasefire should mean that there should be a cessation, which seems a completely valid point to me. And what it seems to me he was getting at in the Fox interview on that issue was the propensity for people to assume that 100% of the responsibility for making peace lies with Hamas's actions, when in fact the last time there was a ceasefire it was Israel that broke it, and here there are questions about breaches of the ceasefire also from Israel's direction. Now, I hope the ceasefire lasts, I hope it endures, I hope it becomes a durable peace, but I think there is an understandable reluctance from people of Mamdani's point of view, or of my point of view for that matter, to be boxed into this idea where it becomes all about Hamas, when in fact it's not all about Hamas.
Look, with respect, I think that can sometimes feel like a false equivalency is being established, or equivalency is being established between Hamas and the government of Israel. Like, Hamas should be disarmed and should not be in charge of the Palestinians. The Israeli government, this specific Israeli government, Netanyahu, I would be happy to have him voted out of office. I think even if you're supportive of what Israel is doing, he presided over this awful collapse of Israeli security, this awful thing that happened. I think it would be better for democracies to vote out their leaders when something goes catastrophically wrong. But he can be voted out and might be voted out because it is a democracy. They have a democratic government that he has tried to, you can say, argue has chipped away at in various ways. But the infrastructure of the governance, not this specific administration, but the governance of Israel, I think is not illegitimate in the way that Hamas's leadership of Gaza is illegitimate, in that they seized power from the other Palestinian political faction and then banned elections and have persecuted them. So they don't have even if I'm not. They are illegitimate to me in a way that the Israeli government is not illegitimate. I may disagree with it. I may think its current leaders should be voted out of office, but there should be, this structure of government should rule Israel. This structure should not rule Gaza, is what I would say.
So, without getting too deep into the weeds of events 20 years ago or whatever,
yeah.
I mean, the reason that there was the clash between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority was that Hamas won the elections in Gaza, even though the Palestinian Authority is much stronger in the West Bank, and the Hamas electoral victory was not recognized and was, I mean, that just wasn't permitted to go through. Now, you can argue about that one way or another. I think the broader point here, Robby, is, and this has occurred in debates about this topic a lot of times, people who are being occupied have a right to resist that occupation. I understand that lots of people don't like that or object to it or would like that not to be the case. But that is, in fact, a right that is outlined in international law and I think is a morally justifiable position. I do not, to be very clear, think that justifies going in and murdering civilians, children or adult civilians for that matter, anybody. I mean, the things that happened on October 7th were clearly war crimes. Right. But the idea that it is just, that this is unrelated to the Israeli occupation of Palestine or Israeli actions, I think that's what people have problems with.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's a complicated issue. We all have a right to resist tyranny on some level, certainly. I think resistance that is going to be completely ineffectual and result in countermeasures that get everyone killed and the whole place destroyed are so futile as to be ill-advised. And I would say that to oppressed people I'm even more unambiguously sympathetic to in China or in Eastern Europe or wherever, where I'd say, yeah, this what's being done to you is wrong, but don't fight back with no plan to actually win and just get everyone killed. You got to be a little bit practical about it. Mm-hmm. Well, we're about to wrap, but anyway, going back to the Mamdani issue of it all, if I was totally against his foreign policy, like dead set against it, and I preferred his tax and regulatory policies, I would vote for him without a heartbeat. I would not care, actually. That is not the case. Actually, it's the other way. I am against his tax and regulatory policies and ambivalent about his Middle Eastern views.
Fair enough.
So that's not the correct combination to win my endorsement.
No free buses winning Robby over.
No.
Up next, the White House is unveiling a new project to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the United States. We'll be right back after this.
The White House is touting plans for a new development project in Washington, D.C. to celebrate America's 250th birthday next year. The administration has unveiled prototypes for an arch that it wants to build along the Arlington Bridge across from the Lincoln Memorial.
This bears some resemblance to the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, leading some to call this version the Arc de Trump. Here's the president showing off the models Wednesday night in a meeting with donors.
It's going to be fantastic. There's a rendering of what it will look like. You have three sizes. That would be the largest one. This is just a model of what it would look like in either of the three, any of the three sizes, which is right here. I don't know if you can see it. So that's Lady Liberty. Did you ever hear of Lady Liberty? On top.
Trump went on to say that the arch would also be a celebration of his efforts to lower crime in the city, saying this is a very safe city now. He did not say what the timeline would be or how much the construction would cost, but the BBC reports it's being funded privately by Trump's supporters.
Trump has made a host of decorative changes during his second term already, including adding gold furnishings to the Oval Office and paving over the Rose Garden lawn. Not everyone has been a fan of those projects. Illinois Congressman Jonathan Jackson says, quote, "Why do megalomaniacs always build giant monuments? You don't put rims on a rental or custom cabinets in an Airbnb. And you sure don't build a gold-plated Oval Office, billion-dollar jet, grand ballroom, and now an Arc de Trump if you actually plan on leaving in 3 years."
Well, I think
it's a mark of the Trump dictatorship to come, Robby.
that's what it means. I think he plans to. I think Republicans want to continue to hold the White House and will mount a vigorous challenge in the form of J.D. Vance. But I don't think he's redecorating because he plans to live there forever. I think he's just adding his personal flair. I'm dead set against the government paying for any of this for sure, as I don't want the government to pay anything or even really exist. But I mean, we're in a city that is an ode to the civic religion of the founders and our best loved presidents from both political parties. There are elaborate monuments to Jefferson and Lincoln and FDR and to our heroes who have died in wars. This is part of the DNA of the city. So do I wake up every day and go, I need an arch to commemorate whatever it is? No, but especially if the government's not paying for it, if they're putting together money for patriotic Americans to build something to recognize achievements of liberty, it's fine, I suppose.
I mean, I have more of an objection to it, but I do acknowledge that it's not like the gravest issue that faces the country. I have probably 50 or 100 complaints about Trump that would take priority over this one. I do think that, one of the reasons you and I were kind of laughing while we played that clip of him brandishing his model and talking about it, it's just that sort of vaingloriousness that he has, or that egotism that he has, that is, I mean, I think it's off-putting on a personal level, but it's him and it's always going to be him. The point about who pays for it, there is an issue with, if it were the government paying for it. The issue with private donors, of course, is that it opens the gates for people to curry favour with Trump by offering to, whether it's the ballroom or the Arc de Trump or whatever else. It's a way of funneling money to things that he likes and buying his favour. I think that's the problem.
I think the most important thing to me is that it looks nice. If it looks ugly, I will hate it. If it reflects the brutalist architecture of some of the city, I will despise it. I want it to be classical, Greco-Roman in as so many of our important government buildings are here, the Capitol, the monuments themselves. That is the aesthetic of the country's governance, where the philosophy comes from. So it is reflective of that and appropriate. It shouldn't be some gaudy 80s monstrosity like Trump Tower type thing. Classic Greco-Roman. That's what I want.
And we don't want a model of Trump sitting atop the pillars, right?
Just Lady Liberty. Maybe does she have the scales of justice and eyes blindfolded? Yeah, that kind of thing. That would be beautiful. And we'll see if that materializes. But that does it for us today on Rising Live. But you can look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way today. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel so that you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. And we'll see you next week.